My name is Claire Spencer. I'm head of the Middle East North Africa program here, and as you're probably aware, we've been running the Yemen Forum here over the past 3 years, so before the events and the uprisings of 2011. And we take great pride in keeping a focus going in the UK and actually partnering, as you'll see from the program, with organisations both in the UK and in Yemen who are interested, as I can see you all are, in keeping the issue of Yemen on the map. So this meeting obviously coincides with the Friends of Yemen meeting, high-level meeting on pledges and developments and the national dialogue tomorrow. But I would say at Chatham House we are continuing to keep a focus, and will continue to do so, on Yemen, and Yemen is particularly, given the presence, very diverse and very active presence of Yemenis in the UK. So without more about Chatham House, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our panel of speakers who will be addressing precisely the issues to be discussed tomorrow. I don't think they need much introduction from me. So we will start with His Excellency Abu Bakr Al-Qirbi, Foreign Minister, who I think needs no introduction. He will then be followed by the United Nations representative to Yemen for the Secretary General of the UN, Jamal Benomar, and then followed by the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Alistair, Burt.
If only.
If only.
not to give people a false impression
sorry,
here. Minister for the Middle East will be doing
Minister of the Middle
fine.
East. Sorry. This is on the record. Get the titles right. I will hand over straight away to the Foreign Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and let me first of all express Yemen's and my own really appreciation for Chatham House continuous interest in Yemen. And I'm glad to see many old faces, but more important, new faces, because this demonstrates that Yemen still gets the necessary attention from not only the British. I see a lot of different shades of color, and therefore it represents really interest internationally. And I think this is clearly shown by the interest of the in the region and Europe and the United Nations as well. And I'm glad to see some of our British Yemeni Friendship Association members here who have always really supported the cause of Yemen. So I welcome you all, and I thank you all for your interest in Yemen. I think this morning you had a very important session. I had a chance to sit in part of that session about challenges of poverty and humanitarian assistance for Yemen. This is, I cannot but say this is an important responsibility of the Friends of Yemen. It cannot be separated from it. And as an ex-physician, I remember two things about poverty. One is saying by Imam Ali, who says, if poverty was a man, I would have killed him. So this shows you the gravity of poverty on human beings. And the second is the story of an ex-Director General of the Swedish, of the WHO, who was working in Sweden and making a lot of money as a physician there. And he had a patient coming to him, and he will write him a prescription for his medication and ask him to return back in a month's time. And he will come and he will see him, his condition gets worse. So he writes another prescription, and a third, and a fourth, and every time his patient comes back in a worse condition. Eventually he asks him, what's happening? Are you taking the medications? He said, no. Why not? Because I don't have the money to buy it. So I think this is an important lesson for those who are always good in giving advice, to think that your advice has to be supplemented by real action and real support. Having said that, let me go now to the Friends of Yemen. The Friends of Yemen, this is its fifth meeting. First one was held here in January 2011 in London, and at the call of the then British Prime Minister, Mr. Brown. And as I recall, it was before actually the Spring Revolution in the Arab world. And unfortunately, the events that followed probably has really put a stop or a suspension of the activities of the Friends of Yemen. But recently it is being revived, and thanks also to the support of the British government, now conservative government, and this shows that at least the Labour and Conservatives agree on something, that's Yemen. And secondly, thanks to the Saudi government, who have been really not only an important partner in this group, but a very also important donor to Yemen, as far as aid is concerned. The challenges really faced by Yemen are many, and I don't want to dwell on these because I'm sure you have read a lot about them. You have the political issue, the economic issue, and the security issue. And if you try to see which is more important, it becomes very difficult to decide, because you cannot really separate and say we can start with the economic issue and everything will settle down, because we know that the economic issues cannot improve without security, and we know that security cannot really improve without a political issue being settled. And therefore we have to work in parallel on these three issues. We have to work in parallel, and this is why I think it is important that our friends, donors or participants in the various activities actually take hand with the Yemenis, understanding that their support for Yemen stems from probably three elements. One, I think, is responsibility, I think, of the international community towards any country that is in a position of Yemen. I think we have to agree on that, that now the international community and the world cannot tolerate fragile states and weak states. And therefore, they have to take their responsibility and address their needs and find the funds to support their needs. Because in the long term, if they don't, they will pay a higher cost for it. The second reason, of course, is because of Yemen's position, geographic, geostrategic, and a very important part of the world. It controls one of the most important trade routes. It is very close to very rich countries on whose resources and oil the rest of the world depends. And therefore, instability in Yemen with 25 million plus is going to be a threat to the stability of the region as a whole and to the economy and the world as a whole. And the third, I think, is that as it's now portrayed that Al-Qaeda and terrorist groups have taken home in Yemen, this is probably an over-exaggeration. But there are elements, of course, of Al-Qaeda and terrorist group in Yemen, as they are in the region as a whole, as they are in Europe as well. And we always complain in Yemen that some of the terrorists come to Yemen from Europe and not vice versa. And therefore, this makes stability in fighting terrorism an extremely important issue for all of us, to address it in a new way, in a new fashion, in a new approach, because we know that force in itself will not resolve this challenge. I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Benomar.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to be with you, with this wonderful company I have here, and with the Minister just introducing us to this session. I'm just going to focus on some very few points. Point number one, and I think what we see in Yemen is an extraordinary experiment of peaceful transition. Only a few months ago, Yemen was very much positioned to be in a situation that would not be that far from where Syria is now. The country was heading towards civil war, and believe me, had the Yemenis decided to go that path, it would have been much more bloodier than what we see in Syria. The country is awash with arms, but still, the remarkable thing that we need to remember, the Yemenis decided on a peaceful path to change and transition. And here, first I want to commend, first the youth. We should not forget that it was thanks to their vision, their efforts, their perseverance, occupying squares throughout the country, that we see the beginning of the change that we see now. And also, you have to commend, the leaders, the political leaders, who made difficult decisions at a time when the political spectrum was very polarized, and as I said, they could have headed towards a much more bloodier path, but still, they decided, the political leaders of Yemen, all of them, to step back and think of a peaceful transition, and they made that deal that opened the path, for the youth to progressively find the processes that will realize, their aspirations, what mobilized them in the streets, for so many months. So it is largely on track, but we stand now at a serious crossroads in this transition. In terms of time, we are half through. But it is really in this second year that the most delicate, sensitive, important tasks are still yet to be accomplished. And this is the national dialogue process that should go on for 6 months for the Yemenis to make a deal about a new constitution. Making a deal about a new social contract is not an easy thing. And also preparing, depending on what political system they will choose, then general elections should follow in according to the timeline of the agreement in February 2014. This is no easy time, in Yemen. It's a decision time. And some time has been wasted, but still, I do believe that if political will is there, they can make it according to the timeline that was agreed when they signed the November agreement. But all this is happening, against a backdrop of a worsening humanitarian situation, a fragile economy, an army that is still divided. There is a plan to reform the armed forces, but at this stage, it is still a plan, and we'll see what will happen with implementation. Al-Qaeda was driven out of the cities that they occupied for several months, and a whole province that they occupied, but they were not defeated in the battlefield. They dispersed, and they are still a very little threat to Yemen, to the region, and to the world. So that, and then, many armed groups still exist and occupy territory and are a state within a state. This is still the reality of today in Yemen. And then, throughout, this transition, it hasn't been easy. It has been lots of ups and downs, a lot of obstruction, and that's what led the Security Council to adopt Security Council Resolution 2051. It's recognizing the challenges of obstruction and that the transition could be derailed. And that's what pushed also the Security Council, what compelled the Security Council to adopt the recent presidential statement of February 2013, naming some individuals. So this is a recognition that the road has not been smooth, it's been very bumpy, and it could get bumpier, and that's why, in a preventive way, the Security Council thought that they needed to take action, and they're still ready to take more action. Also, what we have seen in terms of challenges is the unrest that developed in the south. This is a reminder to everybody that there have been long-standing grievances, and that confidence-building measures to address these grievances, some initiatives have been taken, but there is more. In my view, there needs to be a much more comprehensive program, to address these long-standing grievances. The Iraq, when it started in 2007, it started as a right-based movement demanding with a number of demands that revolved around those who were dismissed from the army, those who were dismissed from the civil service, but they were met with repression, they were met with empty promises. That was the response, and this movement became radicalized and much more maximalist, and that's why the difficulties that we've seen also in recent time. Let me talk also about some of the good news. The good news here is that there is new politics in Yemen. I lived through the long meetings of the preparatory committee for the national dialogue. Good news, first, it's a very inclusive process. For the first time in Yemen's history, you have a committee that has all the political parties, but you have Houthis, you have representatives from the south, you have the youth, you have the women, you have civil society, and all of them working together, trying to develop a vision on how to organize, manage, this national dialogue process. And they did develop a common vision. They did develop, a structure for this, an organization of this conference. And the truth is that from everything that we studied and we've seen, all the national dialogue that we supported around the world, I must tell you that what we have seen now in terms of a plan in Yemen is the best that I have seen so far. Let's see how it will unfold, let's see how it will be put in practice, but in terms of how it is conceived, how it is going to be organized, it's really the best plan for a national dialogue that we have seen in any country. There are some other issues also that I feel still unresolved. Transitional justice, the law is not going anywhere. It's still languishing in Parliament. And I do believe that some consensus drafts could be developed. But again, here it's all depends on political will, and also the one opportunity that we have for these issues that do not go away if they are not addressed. One opportunity that we have is the fact that for the national dialogue, this issue is high on the agenda, and there is a working group that will address this issue. Let's hope there is progress on this, but so far it's been disappointing to see that no progress was made, as well as on the issue of establishing the Commission of Inquiry into the event of 2011. The agreement, the government adopted, the idea, it came from the government in the first place when it proposed this to the Human Rights Council instead of an international inquiry, but the commission has not been established and there has been no progress so far. Let's hope that this will happen soon, because it is through these steps, some first transitional justice law, the establishment of the Commission of Inquiry, that we can see Yemen open a new page and a new path towards national reconciliation. The one thing that we see also in Yemen, and I don't want to be long, is a partnership between the Yemenis in the lead and the international community. I think this partnership has been remarkable. We have the regional organization, the GCC, the United Nations, the Friends of Yemen, who are going to be meeting tomorrow, all working together in support of this transition and the recovery of Yemen. So it is really an opportunity for the Yemenis that they have the world in support of them, and I think it's the money that's been raised or pledged for Yemen exceeded our expectations, almost $8 billion, and half of this amount or more comes from the neighbors. The challenge now is for the donors to deliver on their promises. They have been slow and very little money has trickled. And then second challenge for the Yemenis is for them to develop the capacities to absorb what is out there in terms of support, and that they don't repeat the mistakes from 2006, where lots of money was pledged and there was also no capacity to absorb all the aid that is available. But again, going back to where I started, I'm very hopeful about the future of Yemen. I think it's only a few months ago where the country was facing serious conflict and prospects for more violence. With all its ups and downs, it's really, the country is undergoing a transition, a remarkable peaceful transition, and all this thanks to the foresight of the Yemenis, who decided on a different path, one that is very different from the Syria scenario. So if there is anybody who needs to be congratulated, is the Yemenis themselves, despite all the difficulties that they face. Thank you.
That gives me great pleasure to pass the floor over to the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office, Mr. Alistair Burt.
Thank you, Claire. I preferred the previous title, and I was looking forward to making my first speech as Foreign Secretary to you here at Chatham House, but there we are, reality has intervened. But there we are, and just to make sure the message gets through, I have no wish to usurp the present excellent Foreign Secretary, and wouldn't wish him to feel a threat coming from over the Lancashire border towards him. I will be very brief, so we have as much time as possible for questions, bearing in mind the two excellent colleagues that I'm sharing the platform with this morning. But I welcome this opportunity, the gathering of civil activists the day before the Friends of Yemen conference tomorrow, which will be chaired by my good friend, Foreign Minister Dr. Al-Qirbi, and by William Hague, and by Saudi Minister Dr. Al-Madani. I won't repeat too much of the history that both Abu Bakr and Jamal have been able to talk about. Friends of Yemen was established in London following the serious security challenge that came to a head on the 26th of December 2009. It recognised that Yemen faced a threat from counter-terrorism that required the support of the international community, but also required a new approach. One which worked in partnership with the Yemeni government as they implemented political, economic and security reforms. And yes, I'm rather proud that seamlessly this was something that was picked up from a previous government by the present government. I think I hope it helps to demonstrate that in terms of international relationships, our sense of what we believe to be the right path, not just for the United Kingdom, but for others, is commonly shared amongst colleagues in the United Kingdom. Our system does produce great rivalry and fierce arguments, sometimes more within the coalition than between ourselves and the Labour Party. But it works through dialogue, and it works through a strong sense that after the speaking is done, we work together in what we believe is the best interests both of others and ourselves. And little demonstrates it better than this process. I would share His Excellency the Special Envoy's praise of the Yemeni people for following the course which they have. And events over the last couple of years will only have emphasised the risks if another course is taken. If people would like to see tragedy in action, if people want to know what it's like to take a path away from dialogue, however different, they don't have to look far for an object example. And every sinew must be strained to make sure that that does not happen, and that the Yemeni people were sufficiently foresighted to spot this coming and work on something different is a matter of great credit to every single actor that's been involved. It's taken compromises from everyone, but the alternative is stark and appalling. So I share the tribute both to the Yemeni people and to actors like the UN, GCC and international colleagues for working with people in Yemen to reach the position we are now. Tomorrow will see us hosting the 5th Friends of Yemen meeting and the 3rd since political transition started in Yemen. This meeting is to be about implementation. As both colleagues have said, we need to ensure that the commitments made last year by the Yemeni government and the international community on political, economic and security reforms are delivered. In particular, this meeting will be focused on the national dialogue, on election preparations, and ensuring that the $7.8 billion worth of pledges that are already being made to Yemen are delivered and will make a real difference to the lives of everyday Yemenis. I also welcome the recommendations the NGO Forum have produced in advance of the meeting. I will ensure that a copy of these recommendations will be on the desk of all the ministers at tomorrow's meeting. I agree with all the recommendations. The United Kingdom strongly supports the national dialogue process, and we've made clear the need for the widest participation, in particular women and youth. But like the rest of you, I recognise that the National Dialogue Conference will need to reach out beyond the conference centre across Yemen to spark a national debate about the future Yemenis want to see for their country. We welcome ideas of how we can support the Yemeni government in an outreach programme. And I would say again in relation to this dialogue, our experience over the years is that there are 100 different ways to say no. If people want to stop the process, that's not difficult. That's very easy to do. It's much harder to make it work. Everybody will have to have some form of compromise. Everybody will have baggage. Everybody will have a good reason to say we cannot proceed until this injustice has been corrected, that injustice has been corrected. If everybody does that, there will be no progress and nothing will happen. It's very easy to take the baggage, and you will always find an audience of partisan people who will cheer you to the echo in saying no. No progress will be made. Everybody will have to give something. And all we can do is urge that process is followed through, and that everyone recognises the need to give somewhere. Again, we cannot be too stark about the alternatives that are out there facing those who cannot make a process like this work. Away from that side of it, we also agree that the humanitarian crisis remains deeply troubling, and one that we believe does not get enough attention here in the United Kingdom. Over half the population of Yemen do not get enough food to eat every day. We need to ensure that the United Nations humanitarian appeal is urgently funded. You will know of the interest across the United Kingdom government in this. You will know of the passionate commitment of my colleague Alan Duncan in DFID to Yemen, to Yemeni people, and all the efforts that he's made. We're committed to spend a further £70 million on humanitarian causes over the next 2 years in Yemen. I know also that the Foreign Secretary will be focused on holding all friends accountable for ensuring that the pledges made by the international community are honoured. We all remember lessons of the past, where money committed was not delivered. Now this requires both the international community to come forward, but also the Yemeni government to establish the right mechanisms for aid to be spent effectively and transparently. It's all got to be spent against Yemeni priorities, but the mechanisms must be there from both sides to ensure that this work is done. Accordingly, we do welcome the announcement by His Excellency President Hadi of the establishment of an executive unit for aid delivery in the Yemeni government, and we'll be keen to work and support that. That's all I wish to say at this stage. I know that we've got time for questions. I look forward to those, but thank you. I think the interest shown by all of you this morning, I hope you feel it is reflected and mirrored, and the interest shown by the international community who wish to work together in providing possibly a unique solution. Everything over the last couple of years has indicated whatever symptoms may be common of change, each state is identifiably different, and each state has an individual way of dealing with the issues before it. I agree very much with His Excellency the Special Envoy. Yemen presents an extraordinary opportunity in a difficult region to demonstrate how things can be done. You will not be short of international support and commitment to help you in this process. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to all three of our panel for kicking off what I hope will now be quite a lively discussion. They've very kindly agreed to take questions. So I just want to remind everybody this meeting is on the record, that if you have mobile phones that interfere with the communications equipment, if you could possibly put them on silent. And there will be a roving microphone. So if you would like to identify yourselves when you stand up, I will ask different people to ask questions. I know there's one already over there. In fact, there's two over there. Please briefly introduce yourselves. Thank you. So first of all, then behind.
My name is Abdullah Hamouda. I'm a journalist and a member of Chatham House. I thank the panel for the positive picture which they have painted of what is going on in Yemen, but I revel in playing the devil's advocate, and I'd like to ask 2 points in this respect. The first one is, what kind of change of attitude have the members of the previous Congress government remaining in the national unity government have undergone in terms of change, and whether they are working differently, contrary to what the government was working before. The second point is related to the celebratory appearance of the forced ex-president celebrating the second anniversary of the revolution, and whether this casts a shadow on the process which you are trying to drive.
Okay, since I've been deluged with a sea of hands, I think I'll take 2 or 3 together. So the gentleman behind.
Thank you. Can I thank Mr. Benomar for mentioning the significance of the southern issue in relation to how the problems in Yemen will be resolved. Whilst I am in support of dialogue being the way to resolving all issues, I think the manner in which the southern issue is discussed or simply dismissed by saying that southerners should simply engage in the national dialogue without really giving the issue of the south the due consideration is a recipe for disaster. I say this not to sabotage the momentum of the international community towards the national dialogue, and I'm sure that there will not be any resolution to the southern issue before the resolution and the conclusion of the dialogue. But I wish to put this question to members of the panel. If, as it appears to many southerners, the national dialogue doesn't yield any meaningful results for southerners to appease the demands of the southerners, is it likely that in the near future or after the national dialogue concludes, is it possible that the international community can support the right of the southern people to determine for themselves their destiny in the form of a referendum being held in the south to resolve the issue once and for all?
Sorry, can you briefly let us know who you are, please?
Oh, sorry, my name is Salah Al-Noud. I'm a lawyer and former chairman of the Yemeni Community Association in Sheffield.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time. The next one I saw was at the back there, so is that good? And then we'll come back.
Bari Alamuddin, Al-Hayat newspaper. My question is to Minister Al-Qirbi, and if Minister Burt would like to address it, that would be good. My question, sir, is how do you intend to deal with the threat coming from Iran? Repeatedly, you claim that Iran is interfering in Yemen. So I wonder if you could shed light on that. Thank you.
Well, it all seems to be politics so far. So who would like to, Minister, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you very much for your questions. And as you've indicated, it has turned into a political meeting, rather talking about the friends of Yemen and a future of Yemen. But I suppose journalists always try to take these opportunities and divert us from our major objectives, in which we try to reach consensus rather than divisions. But anyhow, let me assure my colleague Hamouda that the government of Yemen works as a team, irrespective of which party they come from, because we know our responsibility now is to the people of Yemen. And on the first day the government was established, His Excellency President Hadi said clearly, you have to forget about your political affiliations and remember that you are representing now the Yemeni people. And this is how certainly we all behave. Of course there will be differences, but differences does not mean that this is for the worse, maybe it is for the better, because differences give people a chance to get the right solutions. As far as President Saleh's recent appearance, I don't think one should be concerned about that, because the process is going, and as everybody says, nobody is going to derail the process. As far as the southern issue is concerned, I think one of the really very difficult questions to answer, who will decide what are the substantive results? Because I'm sure everybody will define substantive results in his own way. And what can be substantive to me may not be substantive to you. And therefore, I think what is important is that people, and I am a believer, that the grievances from all over the country, not only from the southern states. I know the southern states have probably suffered a lot in the last, since 1994. But there are grievances in Hodeidah, and I have here the Minister of Finance from Hodeidah. He knows how Hodeidah is suffering. I am from Al-Bayda, and I know how Al-Bayda is suffering as well. And I think what we would like to see this conference of dialogue is a forum for us to find the solutions. I think going back to my old profession as a doctor, I think you have to identify the problem and the solution. And as you know, even doctors, when they deal with a single disease, they may disagree about which drug to prescribe for it. But in the end, you have to agree on a drug that is most appropriate and that will satisfy everybody. It may not satisfy all. There will always be a group who will not be happy with the result of a solution. But I think in the end, we know that unless we agree on finding a solution that will save the country, do justice to everybody, respond to the needs of the people, alleviate the grievances, most of them, not all of them, and then there is the road ahead for us to make even further progress and deal with all these challenges. I will not respond to Iran issue because I think we've made a lot of statements about it. And you have to go and read what statements President Hadi and I have made before.
Can I invite questioners to stick to the issues in hand? Yes. The title of this meeting is Friends of Yemen, Aid and Accountability. So for the next round, I'm going to hand over to the second row here, please. Colleague from Oxfam. Oh, sorry. Well, you can start off and then in front. That's fine.
Okay. I'm Khaled Sak from the IMF.
Is it on? Yeah.
From the International Monetary Fund. Yes.
Thank you.
The question to Minister Burt actually is about outreach. He emphasized the importance of outreach. And I wonder if in your plan, on your side, whether you are thinking also about outreach on economic issues. Because as the Minister said, politics, to deal with the political issues, it has to be dealt from multifaceted ways. And there are things that need to be improved, but there is already a lot of effort. I would join Mr. Benomar in congratulating the Yemenis on the things they've done. In the previous panel, for example, one of the CSOs, rightly so, mentioned the expansionary budget. But it's not as expansionary as it seems. The 9% we hear is actually exaggerated because the government was wise enough to budget based on a very low oil price. But for example, in IMF's estimates, when we use the market prices, the budget deficit is much less. And the government has become more transparent. More recently, for example, for the first time, they published the concluding statement of our consultation with them. It's not an annual report or anything, but they've taken that step. They invite you all to look at it. So my question, still there is more needs to be done. There are the issues on subsidies versus targeted transfers, which should be increased. There are the issue of the good step to increase investments in this year's budget, but the risk that if there isn't enough revenue, maybe these investments will not be implemented. So these issues still need to be addressed, and the government maybe needs some support from you to add to its efforts to communicate better and to get feedback from the population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, the second row at the front, please. Gentleman in the pink tie from Oxfam.
Thank you. My name's James Whitehead from Oxfam. Your Excellency Jamal Benomar mentioned with the national dialogue, the opportunity for forging a new social contract. And I wanted to ask Your Excellency, Dr. Al-Qirbi, about the characteristics, the nature of that social contract, particularly from the perspective of ordinary families in Yemen. What will be the nature of that social contract from the perspective of ordinary Yemenis?
Thank you very much. And the lady next to you on the second row, Martin.
Thank you. Dina Mamoon, Amnesty International. My question is about the Commission of Inquiry. Is there a timeline for that, time plan for it? And if not, if there are further delays, is the idea of having an international, a Commission of Inquiry, international investigation be brought back into the agenda?
Okay. I think it's time to come back to the panel. So.
Could I start, because I have to go after this round of questions, I know, because I have another guest arriving at the FCO, but let me deal with one from the last round and one from this round. On the debate about the South, can I tell you there is absolutely no lack of commitment or understanding from the international community about the issues facing the South. I think you suggested in your question that this was being dismissed without due consideration. Absolutely no, it's not. There is a real understanding about long-held grievances and difficulties there, which we have addressed very directly with the government in terms of the sort of things that need to be put right and said right at the beginning, like the presidential decrees towards the end of last year, in order to shape the dialogue that will come. But I think what I would also say is there are many different models that are capable of delivering something different in terms of governance to the South. And all parts of the region have different models that seem to work for them. I think I would be really interested in how the national dialogue deals with discussing these various models and people really working through them before any conclusion is come to that one or other is not acceptable. It won't be for the international community at the end of the day to dictate how this should work. Absolutely not. The dialogue is there to provide the opportunity for Yemenis to decide what territorial structure it's looking for, how it will be shaped, but we think every opportunity is open. And there should be some real discussion of what practical possibilities there are in terms of localised governance and the like. And we think that provides a really good opportunity. So we'd be very keen to see that explored. But please don't feel in any way that the international community has minimised these concerns. And as Dr. Al-Qirbi said, we recognise that others have their concerns too, which is why we think the dialogue is so well founded. In terms of economic outreach and support, yes, absolutely. My colleagues in DFID have been very expansive in relation to this. We know that capacity is increasing all the time, but more probably needs to be done. We're very concerned to make sure that there is an effective unit inside government to translate some of the ideas for economic reform into action, and that will work in conjunction with the efforts coming in from outside on the projects and the like. So yes, economic outreach is very much part of our programme as well as the political outreach. If you will allow me to slip away, yes. I have a further foreign minister to see, but thank you very much for listening to me and the interest generated. I will see both my colleagues tomorrow, so we'll look forward to that, but thank you very much.
Right. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Mr. Benomar, would you like to respond to?
Look, I think many of the questions have been answered already. You know, let me add just a couple of things about the southern issue. As UN, we have no recipe on how this issue is going to be resolved. We have no preconceived ideas. We will not be proposing to anybody whether there should be confederal or federal or any other solutions. The only thing we are going to insist on is two things. One is, this is a matter for the Yemenis to resolve. The solution cannot come from outside, it will only come from them. Second, this will only come through dialogue. They may differ among each other on how that dialogue can be organized and when and where and how and so on, but that's normal. We see it in all situations, but it's only through dialogue that this issue can be solved. And then three, you know, we're urging all Southern leaders to commit to denouncing the use of violence. The only way to solving this issue is through peaceful means, and peaceful means for us in the UN means through face-to-face dialogue among the parties concerned. That's where we stand on this issue. And I think that a lot has happened in recent time. The good news is that there is consensus in Yemen that there is something called the Southern issue. Until very recently, that term even wouldn't have been agreed on among the Yemenis, but this is agreed. Don't forget that in the transition agreement itself, you know, there is a provision for addressing, finding a just solution to the Southern issue. So there was, consensus has emerged that it's time for these issues to be addressed and addressed through dialogue and peaceful means. Second, there is consensus in Yemen that there have been genuine grievances in the south, and the good news is that action is being taken to address grievances, and I think there is a new decree that went a little bit unnoticed, but one that established, you know, a commission to look at, you know, the issue of those who were dismissed from the civil service and the armed forces since '94. You know, there is a commission that's been established that looks at the issue of land and property. These are delicate issues that give rise to a lot of discontent. And what I'm saying is that, you know, the government will need to do more, because for many Southerners this is too little too late. The government will need to do more, and more in terms of addressing these grievances. These are legitimate grievances that people have. But again, to go back to where I started, there is only one way on how this issue can be addressed. It's just through dialogue. And we are, in our outreach, our discussions with all Southern leaders, those who have modest and moderate agendas, as well as the Southern leaders that we are talking to, and those who have very maximalist agendas, we are telling them only two things. One, through dialogue, you can resolve this issue, and please commit and tell your people that no to violence. That's where we stand.
Thank you. I would like to add two things. First, what my brother Benomar said. I think one is that we are here today in Yemen because we have really agreed that violence and civil war will not resolve the solution, and that we will return eventually to a political solution and dialogue to resolve our conflicts. And therefore, anybody who can want to retract on this is going to face a lot of difficulty with the Yemeni people. The Yemeni people are now agreeing that there are many issues they have to settle, and that it is only through dialogue that they will be settled, and not through violence or a demonstration of power by any party. The second point, I think, is what is really necessary now is really how to build confidence. Confidence has been eroded between political parties, eroded between tribals, eroded between various governorates, and this complicates things. But I think once the dialogue starts and people show a demonstration that there is seriousness in dealing with the issues, that confidence building will start, and therefore the road will be smoother. As far as my colleague from Oxfam question about the social contract, I think what people in Yemen aspire to is the aspiration of all people, social contract between people and their government. They want to see accountability, they want to see equality, they want to see power sharing, they want to see that they can be able to make the government accountable to them, and that wealth is shared by everybody. These are the issues that are of importance. And I'm sure that these will take also a substantive amount of time in the dialogue process, because this is, becomes part of the building of the new state of Yemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we've got time for a very quick last round. So I'm going to favour women with the exception of Dr. Banner on the front row, but then the lady in the second row, and we'll see how we get on. If you could keep it fairly brief, please. Thank you.
Aid Executive Committee, I'm a little bit skeptical about it because I'm afraid that the most of the Arab countries and the Middle East have got high corruption rate. How can you guarantee that the composition of the Aid Executive Committee is neutral, being observed in
which committee?
Aid Executive Committee.
The Executive Bureau, yes. Executive Bureau for Aid, yes.
Yeah. Because will we see CSOs be represented or INGO be represented inside the Aid Executive Bureau? Thank you.
The lady on the second row. Thank you.
My name is Helen Lackner. I think there's one issue which is very fundamental to the national dialogue and to the future of Yemen and the Yemeni people, and that's the issue of water, which hasn't been mentioned today. And I'd like to ask really how water is going to be included in the national dialogue, because if we're talking about a possible regionalism or a possible future where the definitions of the administrative areas of Yemen will change, I think the issue of the aquifers and the watersheds and the whole underground water situation has to be taken into consideration. And one,
sorry.
Is that it?
Sorry, well, it's just we're short of time, and there's
Okay,
lots of people waiting.
The other one was about...
But is it also about water? Or?
No, the other one was simply about southern representation, since we've had all this talk about the southerners having 50% of the seats and places throughout the national dialogue. I'm wondering how the people in the north, or the ex-north, the XYR, who form 70% of the population, why don't they demand 70% of the seats? Thank you.
Right. Lady on the front row, over there, please.
Yes, my name is Valerie Secarini from the organization Mercy Corps. My question concerns the challenges that were raised by Mr. Benomar concerning for donors and also for the government of Yemen in terms of the capacity of absorbing the aid that will be provided. This is something that we come across quite often with fragile states because they are in great need of support, and at the same time, because that's why they're fragile, the capacity is not what is supposed to be. But I'm just thinking, could we present alternatives as well for donors instead of saying, well, the capacity is not there, therefore we cannot provide you with extra support. But rather thinking in terms of what will be the alternative, will it be possible to fund and provide support through international development organizations working in close collaboration with the government and with the civil society in Yemen, so that there could be alternatives, because building the capacity of the government is very important, but it's going to take time. It never happens overnight. And so we have to find alternatives in order to provide to the people what they need right now, and not that they have to wait that the capacity of the government is being built. So it's a comment and at the same time a question. Thanks a lot.
Right, in recognition of all of those of you who've been standing, the last question goes to the gentleman standing at the back, just in front of you. Thank you.
My name is Galal Makhtari. I'm from Aden, Yemen. I grew up there. Over the last 60 years, all I hear is about Yemen crisis and about aid. And I also learned that a lot of this aid has always been going into a black hole. And my question is, when will our leadership and the international community give up the begging bowl and start creating programs for the Yemenis to regain their productive capacity? And we had a lot of it.
Right, thank you very much indeed. So for last comments, who would like to go first? Your Excellency.
Before I give to one of the audiences to answer one of the questions, I will respond to some of the questions raised. One, the issue of water. I think this is, of course, a major crisis for Yemen, all of Yemen. And we bet on two things. Either there will be hopefully a climate change and that the rain belt will move towards Yemen, which far-fetched, I suppose, but I hope it will happen. The second, of course, is the sea. And this is why we are addressing the issue with utmost really urgency. The national dialogue, I'm sure it will look at this as part of many of the challenges that will face the future government and how the government will deal with it in this respect. As far as the southern representation and allocating actually not 50 but more than 50, it cannot be less than 50. And there is now, the representation actually is about 56, 57%. So it is more than half. The objective of that really is, I suppose, the confidence building, as we have said, that they will not feel that whatever decisions are taken will be dominated by citizens of the North. This is what I call pragmatic democracy. Okay, it may not be part of the or acceptable on a purely democratic basis, but I think what's important for us in Yemen now is to see that people come and participate and they feel they are part of the decisions for the future of Yemen. Aid absorbing capacity and the black hole, the Executive Bureau. If Your Excellency will allow me, I have here the Minister of Planning and International Cooperation, who is the Vice Chair of the Executive Board, and I will ask him to respond to these three questions.
Perhaps during coffee on a bilateral basis, because I think we're running a little bit short of time, but if you have a very brief statement to make.
Tomorrow I will speak.
Okay.
No, but these people should hear you. They will not be there tomorrow.
Do you have one sentence? Do you have a single, just a very brief sentence to answer the question about transparency in the...
Yes, we...
هل في فساد في الإكزيكتيف بيورو؟
It is not started now.
Ah.
Then it will not be a magic solution. The people will be from Yemen, but we'll put them under transparency, under accountability. So that's what we will do. It's not a whole solution. Just we are trying to expert the new way of absorption the donor budgets. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll be looking out for this.
Look, I think the one thing that we shouldn't forget is that there has been a very serious process led by the Yemenis to first identify what the needs and priorities are. There was a joint assessment exercise supported by the World Bank, the United Nations system, the Islamic Development Bank, EU, and it was a process that helped the government, to zero in on a number of limited goals and objectives and priorities, and has been a lot of work has been done to identify priority projects. So we should commend the Yemenis for doing all this work. Also, we should commend them for trying to for coming to the conclusion that it's not going to be business as usual. They decided to innovate and create a new structure to address exactly this issue of delivery. And this new structure is being established, and I think we should wait and see how it's going to operate. But I'm very optimistic that by its composition with the support professional structure that it will have, I'm sure that will speed up considerably the necessary work that is needed, to move to implementation, and that was the chronic problem that the government faced in the past. Also, we always complain in many countries about the lack of absorptive capacity, but it should not lead to donors to do the usual, which is that bypass government, create parallel structures that really undermine government and undermine building capacity at the end of the day. I will never forget, I was once in Afghanistan. I went to a little village, a little town, and then I asked people, well, 3 years have passed since the change, what improvement happened in your life? Well, they were able to point out to the little bridge that was built, a school that was repaired, quite a few projects that made a difference. And then I asked them who did that. They said, well, this international NGO, USA, they don't know who. And then when I asked them what did the government do, they said nothing, and in a very bitter way. Governments in transitional situations cry for legitimacy. So legitimizing government is very important. So it's very important that despite these problems of lack of absorptive capacity, bureaucratic procedures, and so on, the government is not completely bypassed. You have to work with the government to build the capacity so they can absorb and be in the lead, and aid doesn't become a completely parallel exercise to what government does. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and that's certainly a very good point to finish this particular part of the discussion with a focus on more discussions tomorrow, aid actually being delivered, and I can assure the gentleman at the back, will be monitoring the question you raised about the black hole and where things go in future. I think it's really by keeping a focus on the complexity of developments that things will move forward. Now, we're going to finish today, since we've talked a lot about views from the ground. Support Yemen, which is an advocacy group many of you will know based in Sana'a, have produced a 5-minute video, which I do hope you'll stay for, and I will invite the panel to stay for. We can move down, there'll be seats provided for us there. It's basically a 5-minute video with Yemeni citizens to gauge their views on the various issues we've been discussing today. So if you like, these are views straight from the ground, and I invite you to stay. Otherwise, or indeed after this 5-minute video, there will be tea and coffee served upstairs, to which you're all invited. But please join me first in thanking the panel very much indeed.